All right, mean tweets. You found nice ones.
Yeah, I mean, we've done a good job on the podcast, I think, recently, especially you having, turned a new leaf on life. However, WL Gasbara, you hack garbage. You can't do this game and say, I got nothing when a team comes up. I think referring to the over on the Bears. Just say Mitch improves and the Vikings line doesn't.
Oh, an angry Bears fan.
Yeah, I mean...
Haven't heard one of those. My favorite are the people that are like, you guys are idiots because you think Mitch didn't play well last week.
What about insanely fresh, referring to the Lions last week's team? It's simple. The games we gave the ball to carry on, we won and lost the other games. Even when we had a healthy Kerryon Johnson, he wouldn't get the ball enough, which has to change this season.
I hope the Lions are listening. Bill Z... The Lions are not taking a cornerback in round one, especially Greedy, who makes zero
effort to tackle.
Zero effort to tackle. No. Lions will take Ed Oliver in round one. You've heard it here first. Ed Oliver, round one to the Lions. Bill Z, my source.
No one, our colleague Aaron Block once tweeted out a picture of the Lions defensive line. I think they're pretty set there, right? And they have been. They've had good players up there for a while. What they don't have is coverage.
What they need are tackling corners.
I really wish the Falcons would have heard my advice in '89 and not drafted Sanders because he couldn't tackle.
Right. Speaking of corners, a lot was made of Byron Murphy being too slow to play zone corner. I'm struggling to remember players from the Pac-12 who are good zone corners that weren't necessarily speedsters. Can't remember any.
Yeah, there aren't any. We never talk about draft analysts being too slow.
Well, it's a slippery slope. So they're all slow.
Doug's Bunny, OG, 4 days ago, starting to prefer you guys over Steve and Sam / Mike. Nice.
Restore the Roar said Steve Palazzolo and Mike Renner are the only two PFFers worth listening to. One pride.
And of course, Justin McCollum, who is similar to my friend Vince, who emailed or texted me the other day asking me if I knew who the owner of the New Jersey Generals was. Part of the joke. Eric repping the NJ Generals tee is the truth. To which you in our show notes just wrote no.
But congrats on that. I'm glad someone likes your t-shirts.
Yeah.
Also, I look
San Antonio Commanders coming in the mail.
I look real shiny right now thanks to I'm going to blame the pool.
Was it Swim Thursday?
Swim Thursday. Let's talk a little bit about O-linemen. The article, we've talked about this a couple of seasons now in a row, but the stability, the predictability from college to pro of O-linemen and sort of just from pro to pro. But there are some things that, bring up, there are some questions about it, right? So you should go, if you haven't read the article, go check it out. ProFootballFocus.com, I think it came out maybe 10 days or so ago. But O-linemen are tricky because there's only so many spots in the NFL to play O-line.
Yep.
And it's sort of hard to know if a guy that hasn't played is worth the salt or not.
Yeah, and our colleague Mike Renner, he had a very good tweet the other day. He was talking about true pass sets, and he was looking at, basically defining it as 4+ pass rushers, straight quarterback drop, 7 yards or more, no play action, no screens, and took over 2 seconds for the quarterback to throw. And while these are hard cutoffs in our models, we certainly talk about when we look at a player's performance at the college level, we do regress for things like how often do they throw quickly? Because I think we talked about this a lot. People, I think, understand what can change a model, but they overweight it, right? So we look at Pat Mahomes playing in the Big 12, and we say, well, he can't play the NFL because he's a Big 12 quarterback. Or Baker Mayfield, he can't play in the he can't play in the NFL. And it's like, well, no, you have to weigh you have to downgrade him, but properly. And so Mike looked at this and he said, okay, where do these guys grade on those plays? And it pops up, Reisner had 153 of those snaps. He graded a 92 in our system, which is the highest. Andre Dillard, a little shy of 90. Jonah Williams, about 80. Jawan Taylor, Cody Ford, a little lower. And this is exactly what we're sort of getting when we try to take these guys on the play level and simulate their rookie years in the NFL a bunch of times. We get sort of that same order, and it's a good thing. when we talk about trying to project to the next level, we have to take the previous data that we have and sort of rip out all the context and then apply context at the NFL level. And what we found is we've had some success in doing so.
I mean, I thought it was interesting because Mike is a big proponent of Jonah Williams. And in that specific situation, it doesn't shine quite as bright for Jonah Williams. And that's exactly the type of thing that we are working to do. The tough thing is that people will overweight everything, as you said, and all you have to do is go watch like Monday morning television during the football season, and all people are talking about is what just happened and what does that mean going forward, or what are these three highlight plays, what does that mean going forward, right? And none of those things are all that predictive. Most of them are actually not predictive at all. It's a waste of your time. It's complete noise. But yet it grabs, headlines and stuff like that. So that's one of the reasons that we think that Mr. Reisner is numero uno on the tackle list, and would take him over Jonah Williams.
Despite the fact that we have disagreements in the building about who, I think, and some of the stuff, we were talking to Mike yesterday, and he was like, well, Jonah's playing all these players from Clemson, and
sure.
And Reisner's playing almost no one in the Big 12, and it's like, well, we also put that in our models, but our model doesn't weight it as highly as his observations would. I think the answer is probably somewhere in the middle, and that's why we have scouting priors in our model as well. But even when you fold all of that stuff in, Reisner ends up being projected as our best project as a tackle, but also when you swing him into guard, his statistics look pretty good. The interesting thing about projecting a guy to a different position, though, is that it's easier to run block as a tackle, right? So if he's already good enough to be an NFL pass protector at tackle, don't necessarily move him into guard because it's easier to pass protect there, because it's harder to run block. So
right.
so Reisner's not going to be as favorable as a run blocker to the degree that matters than if you leave him at tackle. So those are all things that you have to consider. You also have to consider scheme, whether he's a power counter man guy or a zone guy. But he looks good no matter sort of how we distribute things relative to the rest of the class. So whoever gets him probably back into the first round is going to get a real good player, I think.
Do not draft a guard in the first round, please. Save yourselves. Let's talk about the big-ish news. I think Sterling Shepard signing is whatever, but the DeMarcus Lawrence signing is a big one for the Cowboys because they've got all of these contracts coming up and a bunch of players. Lawrence was one, Dak, Zeke, Byron Jones. And I've seen on multiple occasions on different programs, on different channels, analysts ranking the most important of these players. And it's very interesting to see almost across the board, Zeke comes up as 1 or 2, but Lawrence is right there with him in terms of importance, followed by Dak and Byron Jones pretty far, usually at the back end of that list. Personally, Byron Jones to me would be a little higher up. He'd be higher than Zeke for sure because of the replaceability. I know people are going to lose their minds over that. But I think the question really is DeMarcus Lawrence versus Byron Jones. Who are you spending your money on?
Yeah, and the interesting thing with those two positions is we know that edge is more predictable than corner, but we think corner is more valuable player for player. The replaceability of Lawrence is probably higher, especially in a draft where they don't have a first-round pick, but in a draft where you have some depth there, at edge and things like that. Corner, not so much. And the other thing with corner is that Jones plays. He's so versatile that he gives you a guy who can excel as an outside guy, but he can also play inside where he played his first few years. He can also play safety. Like there's a ton of versatility, and on defense you need a lot of good players in the back end. So I think he offers even surplus value there. The thing with Lawrence is like we act like he's been a guy who's been this really terrific player for a long time. He has 2 good seasons under his belt. Jones has 1 as an outside corner, but he also has he was a 3 Sigma athlete, that kind of thing. Like he's also got some things to him. I think the debate between he and Zeke is a non-starter for me, but the debate between him and Lawrence, like we also know that the the market in the NFL is irrational enough where Lawrence is going to get overpaid for his perceived brilliance than Jones would. So again, that sort of like tilts us in the direction of thinking about Jones as being the one that we would actually, sign first. But ultimately Dallas, took Lawrence.
Yeah, I'm totally with you there. And you brought up one point that I hadn't even thought of yet, which is the ability to sort of get bargain guys at pass rusher, right? Like they're going to be out there. By the way, Tiger is teeing off at the moment. We are both heavily invested in him not hitting the fairway on his first shot. It's going left. Oh, he twirled the club. You know what? He hit the fairway, and I'll take it.
Dead air? No.
I'll take it because I want to see.
You are a Tiger fan.
I want to see.
So he hit the fairway. Wow, good for him.
Twirled the club, which probably means he's going to be a flaming disaster this week. But
his first shot was good.
Yeah, his first. See, he like always hits in the rough and then recovers. Byron Jones provides for you at a cheaper price something that is more valuable. So I'm willing to take that slightly bigger risk, given that I'm paying less for it than I would for Lawrence. And Lawrence, he's getting shoulder surgery right after this. So I don't know, that signing that big of a contract to that guy without having a quarterback that I think you can be super confident in is worrisome to me.
Yeah.
And I am pretty worried about the Cowboys. The Cowboys are an important team for the NFL from a broadcast standpoint because they are America's team and they show up on TV all the time. Yeah. And this could be the start of something that's not great.
Well, here's interesting because like I also think the Cowboys do some things well, right? I think in-game decisions not being one of them, but like to some degree they draft good players, right? Mm-hmm. Every time we've done one of these analyses where we've studied the cumulative war of the players that Dallas drafts, they draft good players. Here are their top salary earners. I think this is before the Lawrence contract, and maybe not actually, but this is with the Lawrence contract. Tyron Smith, trench guy. Zach Martin, trench guy. Cooper, already bought spend a first round pick on him, are going to have to extend him for a DeMarcus Lawrence, Travis Frederick, trench guy. Tyrone Crawford, trench guy. La'el Collins, trench guy.
Right.
Robert Quinn, the exact guy that you would replace DeMarcus Lawrence with off the street.
Yep.
And then you get down to Zeke before you get to Byron Jones. So like, are we valuing the right things necessarily here? I don't think so.
Well, here's the thing is there's a lot of argument out there for if you have a rookie quarterback that you're starting, you have to go spend all this money.
Yeah.
And that's not true. It's not a binary world. You should, if you are a certain number of percentage points confident in that young quarterback, then yes. Yep. But the problem is if you can't be confident in how good that young quarterback is going to be, then you may have to restart because it may turn out that he is bad. And if you are trying to restart with all of this money invested in players that aren't going to be there once you have this new quarterback, you set yourself a little bit behind the eight ball. And the thing with Dak was he was so good his first season, but that was so much situation. The situation was so ideal there. When the situation has not been ideal, he has been nowhere near as brilliant. So I think there's a misnomer that Zeke is like a catalyst for that situation that makes Dak a better quarterback. And I think there's a little bit of a misnomer that Amari Cooper is the savior there. I just want to say this for a second. So everyone says, oh, look, the Amari Cooper trade was great. People always just completely neglect the other side of things, which is if you don't trade for Amari Cooper, you may have a cleaner picture of Dak. You have a first-round pick, and your team may not make that run, which may cause you to tear things down.
Yep.
You may be looking at the Cowboys going with Lincoln Riley and Kyler Murray right now, making a totally drastic change in things. And now it looks like, they're going to be saddled. They are going to invest heavily in this iteration of the Cowboys, which, by the way, they made it as far as they made it.
They won 8 games out of 11 with Cooper, but I believe that their point differential was actually negative during that time. Like you're talking about, again, like we talk about this with Seattle all the time, and we like the Seahawks too, but like we're talking about Seattle, when you're rewarded by variance for decisions that can be suboptimal, that's a positive feedback loop that can often cause disappointment in subsequent years.
Yep.
So I think like when you make a trade for Amari Cooper and it helps you win a Thanksgiving game against Washington with Colt McCoy by 8, you're like, oh, look, this is all the reinforcement we need. It's like, well, you won a Thanksgiving game against Colt McCoy by 8, right? It's like, who cares? I mean, you win a Thursday night game against New Orleans when New Orleans simply just doesn't play well. And it's mostly your defense that was terrific in that game. It's tough. It's tough because I don't know, like, necessarily, if they are certainly, like, are they learning from these things? Probably not, because the outcome ended up good for them despite the process.
And I'm not saying that, like, all things are doom and gloom for the Cowboys. I just think it's important to look at the other side of things, to consider that just because one thing appears to be working out well so far does not totally mean that the other side of that distribution can't still come to fruition, or couldn't have come to fruition. So Cowboys would be a super interesting team to watch. We talked about them for a while. Let's move on to Unstable Stat of the Week. It is brought to us by our good friends, our new sponsors, draftjizz.com. All 22 eruptions for your all-day long draft buzz. You want to enjoy the draft season, head to draftjizz.com.
Does that have to be cut out or no?
I have no idea. We're going to see if
the seeds of football teams are found on draftjizz.com.
I think it accurately sums up what pre-draft Twitter and
I'm pretty
TV
sure I made up that like website while being pissed at somebody for being a draftjizz.com proprietor on Twitter.
Happens a lot. We're going to talk about throwing to open targets, because this is actually a more stable component of accuracy relative to throwing into tight coverage. It's similar to the pressure clean situation, in that one is a more controlled situation, right? If you're throwing to a guy that's open, you are worrying about making the throw. Into tight coverage, there are so many more things that can sort of, go wrong. You're pressing. It's also a lower sample size. So it's important. Those get highlight reel they get put on highlight reels. They get talked about a lot.
They're high leverage plays, so we care a lot about them.
Exactly. They can change the way the game turns out, obviously, but they're not nearly as stable season to season. We have now 3 seasons worth of accuracy ball location data. So the most accurate quarterbacks, these are throws that are on the receiver's frame or perfectly in stride, hitting a guy perfectly in stride, throwing to open receivers. These are receivers with a step or more of separation. A really shocking list here: Drew Brees, Tom Brady, Phillip Rivers, Matt Ryan. Andy Dalton makes the list.
Andy Dalton was good last year.
He was. But here's the flip side of that. Most uncatchable throws throwing to open guys: Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Mitch Trubisky, Dak Prescott, Josh Rosen, Jared Goff, Jameis Winston, Alex Smith. So, there's another side to that coin.
Yep.
Obviously, not throwing catchable passes is a huge deterrent. There's a big jump between Jackson and Allen, and then a big jump between him and Trubisky, and then another jump between Trubisky and Prescott. So it's really those 3, Jackson, Allen, and Trubisky, on their like own tier. Jackson, almost 20% of his throws to open receivers were uncatchable. We're going to talk about the Bills here in a second. But I think one of the big things with Josh Allen, obviously, is the idea that he was successful in Buffalo, and it might be worth pumping the brakes a little bit.
Yeah, we've been getting tweets and things like that about last year's quarterback class, and folks being like, "Well, how are you guys responding to being wrong about Allen? Like how are you?
Well, how are you responding to it?
And there's an interesting aspect to it, like when we talk, looking at the EPA per play for Buffalo. Offensively, they were 31st, 31st in passing. But they improved with Allen on the field. They were just like 25th in those games that he started, and 22nd in passing offense EPA. A lot of that has to do with him running. We know scrambles are very effective when they happen, but like the idea that Allen is this sort of like brilliant, he proved everybody wrong. Hey, Jalen Ramsey, do you still think I'm whack kind of thing? Like,
right.
It's 1983 called, they want your passing statistics back. I mean, like, less than 53% completion, more interceptions and touchdowns. That's like just simply not going to cut it in right now. I think like Josh Allen still, to me, comps to Jake Locker and probably worse, to be honest with you. And so I think Buffalo fans probably need to pump the brakes a little bit before, they take a victory lap on this draft pick, especially considering how down the AFC East was last year and how many wins they were able to get in that division, despite.
You sound like a bitter Vikings fan.
Having a poor.
That's what you are.
Poor offense.
Bitter Vikings fan. Here's the thing about our good buddy Josh Allen. If you look at, so people often say, oh, but he was so successful running. Runs and sacks are often pulled apart, and that should not be the case. So if you actually just look at all of his, if you just say, okay, let's lump sacks in there. We're not, all the times that he held onto the ball instead of throwing it, they were drastically negative EPA per play. 3.3 yards per play, which is not going to get it done in the NFL. So it is an interesting way to look at it. If I pull out sacks here, which I can do, it's just not representative of what the play truly is, right? Because there are so many times that you scramble and the scramble actually turns into a sack, and so it just gets thrown out of the sample set. Obviously, if you throw those out, you get closer to 7 yards per play, and you're like, oh, that's great, right? He's fantastic. He's great back there, positive EPA per play, but sacks are a huge part of the game, often get thrown out.
Yeah, and there are some refrain. Like Buffalo did not have good receiving cores last year. Robert Foster was undrafted. He ended up being one of their key components. But at the same time, they ran the ball a lot. They did a lot of design quarterback runs specifically because Josh Allen's inaccurate. There are going to be games where this game script is not in their favor, right? So, and Allen's going to have to drop back and throw the ball on 3rd down and long, and I just don't think necessarily he, has the goods to do that. And, when you look at the Bills right now, lined over under at 6, last year it opened at 7, was bet down to 6. They ended up being able to push that. Looking at it now at 6, I think there's going to be a lot of fanfare for the over, right? And
there's going to be a ton.
When we look at their games, we have them favored or kind of like pick 'em in like 3 of those games. And there are some games like where against Cincinnati and Denver where it's basically a half point on each side. Baltimore at home, New York Jets at home, Miami at home, at Miami, at New York Jets, at Giants. Those are all winnable games. But ultimately, if we simulate this thing, we have Buffalo at under 6 wins. Not by a ton, not like a bettable amount, but we're not as favorable because of those quarterback accuracy issues, because of how noisy we know running is, and how much I think people are down on Miami. People are probably not as far up on the Jets as they should be, and I think New England obviously is here for a while. So again, like we probably would put Buffalo, as much as they're going to hate us, last place in that division going into next year.
Yeah, they're going to hate that. Let's talk a little bit about their draft slot here. They're in 9. There's going to be some clamoring for, I'm sure, give Josh Allen the deep threat that he needs.
Give it up.
Right? The issue with that is when a guy is missing open receivers almost 20% of the time, you might be better off turning to a different area of need.
Yes.
And so I think Byron Murphy, who we've had mocked there, we just talked about, right, who has excellent zone skills. He is a potential, multi-year starter for you at corner. You've already got Tre'Davious White, who we're going to talk about here in a second, has had one good year, an example of instability of coverage, was not great last year. But if you can build a backbone of coverage, of stopping the pass, you can be a little more successful given that your offense is not going to be putting up 30 a game.
Yeah, and that's exactly true, right? And the Bills have been good. So this is, again, shows you, you would talk about stability of coverage, but also the the impact of defense. The Buffalo Bills a season ago were 4th in total EPA allowed defensively, negative .07 EPA per play, 9th in rushing EPA allowed, 4th in passing. Like, the most important thing a defense can do, they were good at it. And yet, because of, the offense's struggles, because of, issues with turning the football over, all those sorts of things, they're 6-10. When
I don't understand how you can have such a successful first-round quarterback pick and be 31st in EPA per play on passing plays, and that includes scrambles, that includes sacks. They're 28th in rushing.
Yep.
So, like, despite having great coverage, they were still a below-average team.
But if you look at Tre'Davious White, for example, so and our colleague Sam was on with Minnesota radio talking about Xavier Rhodes and how Vikings fans think he's elite and they're pissed, mad about his grades and stuff. White provides another anecdote in this realm. Last season, 2017, in coverage, he had a 90.1 grade. He had 4 interceptions. He had 13 pass breakups. His quarterback rating allowed was 65. Last season, if you just look at his passer, he had 30 fewer targets into his coverage. Good. He allowed about 8 percentage points more in terms of reception. Not quite as good, but 250 fewer yards, 3 yards per catch less. It's great.
He got better.
Only 94 yak. He's a good tackler. All that kind of stuff. 2 interceptions, 5 pass breakups, so not quite as good. 76 passer rating throwing into his coverage. So every player that throws into his coverage turns into Bobby Hebert, right?
Got to take that when you can.
But he had 10 penalties. And like, I know that people don't think that that's a big deal, right? Like, oh, what the heck is one illegal contact penalty, or what the heck is one down the field pass interference penalty? But that's like, in some cases, that's 70 yards. In other cases, like, we think about, and we have a betting product for PFF. We watch these games. We know how thin the margins are. One illegal contact penalty on a third quarter drive to take the lead when you think your defense has gotten off the field, it's huge. The win probability added for those is tremendous. And so and that's why his coverage grade dropped almost 30 units last year, because he had these penalties, and we grade them harshly because they are harsh plays on the football field. So Tre'Davious White, imagine if he reverts back to something towards his mean. They get Byron Murphy to play that other corner. Yep. Micah Hyde was their most valuable player last year in terms of WAR. They could be, Jordan Poyer not that far behind as the other safety. They could be a pretty fierce defense, but they shouldn't rest on the Tre'Davious White laurels. You need tons of corners, because there's going to be some years where White doesn't play as well. There's going to be some years, if they get Murphy, he's going to be great one year, he's going to be more average the next. And that's the reason why you load up on these players on the outside.
Well, and I think the other thing is, okay, if you want to take advantage of Josh Allen, yes, you do have to take shots, right? Because he's not a particularly accurate guy at any level of the field. But you can find guys that can run fast down the field at other places than number 9 overall, right? Yep. You don't need DK Metcalf to be that guy. And so to me, the maximizing their ability is to do exactly what you just said, right? To say, okay, let's take a corner that fits our scheme really well. It's really valuable. We can be, even though it's unstable, hopefully in that top tier of defenses in coverage. And then we'll try and win these close games, because Josh Allen will hopefully be a good running back and all these different things, right? Like, that's not a sustainable way to win a Super Bowl. But if you're hoping for the Buffalo Bills to be better next year, that's their clearest path.
To be a Ravens-like team last year, it's not something I would bet on, but it's something that if conditioned on having Josh Allen, this is what you should do. I was talking about this with some friends a couple hours ago, but the idea of like wide receiver ones don't happen very often in the draft, right?
Sure.
Like 2014, we got Evans, we got Landry, we got Beckham, but like most of the time, wide receivers play a role in an offense. You're a slot guy, you're the outside guy, and like you're far better off not paying a premium for a guy you think can do everything than to take a late round pick and get a guy who can do one thing really well, especially in an offense where like your quarterback is a type, right? Your quarterback is not your quarterback would not even be able to take advantage of a wide receiver one if it was right in front of his face, right? So you need to, instead of taking those picks early, you should go later on and find guys who would mesh with a quarterback of Josh Allen's type.
Talking about the Tre'Davious White thing, EPA per target allowed, which is still a team statistic,
Yes.
right? But speaks to the difference in, so like we can look at plays that were nullified on those, right? In 2017, it was a negative EPA per play to target Tre'Davious White on average. And in 2018, it was massively positive, 0.132 per target, which is a lot. And obviously interceptions play a role in that. But even if you take out interceptions, which are huge plays, EPA per play allowed on targets in Tre'Davious White's coverage doubled from 2017 to 2018. So he is a great example of the variance in coverage. Maybe he was playing a little nicked up, who knows, but getting Byron Murphy on the other side would be something that,
and this is an example of something
of
where we don't think that Tre'Davious White's a bad player.
Right.
We just think he did not grade as well one year, and so he's probably not nearly as good as he was in 17, and he's probably not as poor as he graded in 18. He's somewhere in between, and that's again why you have to take these things. We're measuring performance to the degree that we observe it, and and we do our best to sort of project forward. But I would say he's a pretty good corner, especially in that scheme. But you're not going to get 2017 out of him every single year.
All right, let's talk about Josh Allen here for a second. Of that rookie class was a solid ways behind Baker Mayfield, obviously, in terms of wins above replacement, a solid ways behind Sam Darnold, and even behind Lamar Jackson. The only guy that he was actually better than was Josh Rosen. And to back that up, I'm going to tell you two metrics that are stable and where he ranked, and two that are unstable and where he ranked. So the two that are stable, grade from a clean pocket, and avoiding negatively graded throws, right? Those are the two most stable things we have from a quarterback standpoint. He was 30th of 35 in grade from a clean pocket. He was 32nd of 35 in avoiding negatively graded throws, right? Those are characteristics of a quarterback that are sticky, that are consistent, that do a good job of telling you really what this quarterback is. From a throwing standpoint, those include, right, sacks and all those different things. It's not passer rating. So bottom 5 of the league in those two things. Two data points that are unstable, meaning they're subject to wide swings from season to season. Grade under pressure and positively graded
plays. You have
right. Runs too.
You have the runs.
So grade under pressure, 13th out of 35. Positive play grade rate, 8th.
27-ish%, right? That's what you're looking at there.
So like he was on the upper end of variance there. It could actually get worse.
His positively graded drop back rate, is similar to Drew Brees' and Patrick Mahomes. You're talking about, and again, we know that those things regress. The difference is that Mahomes and Brees are top 2 in avoiding negatively graded throws. So the thing about it is as you said, it could get worse. Yep. And I know Bills fans will refrain and say, maybe it's something about it. Maybe he's sturdy and he can be good from a muddy pocket because he's got all these traits. And we know year after year after year, people say this about every quarterback who happens to be popping up there, and year after year after year, it ends up being wrong. So, are we going to bet the Bills under right now? And
here's the thing: is we said this about Josh Allen coming out of college, right? So his issue was accuracy. He and Lamar Jackson, uncatchable throw rate through the roof.
Yep.
Josh Allen's uncatchable throw rate, last in the NFL, right? The worst. Last in the NFL in terms of the highest uncatchable throw rate, right? Ranked last. So, accuracy is just not something you're teaching at the NFL level, and that's the unfortunate component of taking a guy like Josh Allen. You can certainly win in a season with him, right? You can have one of these high variance seasons. You can have him chucking it deep a ton, taking a ton of shots and hoping to be on the right side of variance over the course of a season. But it's not a sustainable thing, right?
Can I give you a blast from the past?
Sure.
So in 1993, Drew Bledsoe was picked first by the New England Patriots, and Rick Mirer was picked second by the Seattle Seahawks. And Bledsoe, as a rookie, his statistics were not particularly, he was under 50% completion, similar touchdown interception ratio, and I think he was 5-7 as a starter. and but the Patriots did a lot of NFL things. Like they made him do what he was going to do as an NFL passer. And Rick Mirer, on the other hand, played for a Seahawks team that had a really good defense, had a good running game, and he was, a pretty, good scrambler. He averaged 5 yards a carry, all that kind of stuff. And so the narrative was always well, Rick Mirer, I mean, look at him, he's going to eclipse a lot of the expectations. And we never graded 1993, but I would almost venture to guess that, we would have had similar refrains about him. And then so Mirer, ended up flaming out, I think he lasted, 3.5 seasons in Seattle, ended up going to Chicago, had a basically a backup career after that. And Bledsoe, of course, was a Pro Bowler by year 2, making the playoffs and all that kind of stuff. Because again, one season's worth of data, especially when expectations are low. The 1992 Seattle Seahawks were 2-14. They had terrible quarterbacks. Guy comes in, is okay, this looks great. And it's well, you had a really good defense. You had kind of an easy schedule, all this kind of stuff. And it's let's wait till year 2. Let's look at for these stable statistics to start to emerge as the emerging properties of a player, rather than just after year 1 declaring victory for going 6-10.
I'm declaring victory. That's what it amounts to. Anything else on the Bills?
Well, I mean, last season we were 1-3-1 picking their games. Can I briefly lament? So our first pick for the Bills was over 40.5 at Minnesota. God. I remember you and I being God, are the Bills going to be good enough to get this thing over 40? Bills were up 27-0 at halftime. I think the game ended 27-6, and so we did not get that over. We had them plus 10 at Houston in a game they should have won if Nate Peterman doesn't throw a pick 6 to lose the game. We had them as our lock of the week in Derek Anderson's first start, plus 7.5 at Indy. That wasn't good. Plus 4 at Miami, which was the game that we got to push, but Josh Allen on a wide open throw to Charles Clay in the end zone missed him. And then we faded them week 17 against Miami, which was Josh Allen threw a pick 6 to put Miami back in the game, but ultimately Ryan Tannehill was not good enough. So this was one, I think, of the teams we've gone through so far, this was the one we had a losing record on, 1-3-1 picking Bills games. So we were wrong about them last year. If you're a Bills fan, maybe we're wrong about them this year.
Could happen. I remember taking Buffalo in the Super Contest against the Vikings and being wow, thank God. Glad I got one right.
Yeah. That was I think the biggest upset in league in while we've been tracking lines. Plus 17.5 was and then winning that game outright was a pretty big stunner.
Well, that's why you guarantee $84 million. Let's move on to the Cincinnati Why segment. I have 2 stories here that are gym related, and neither of them actually took place at the Cincinnati YMCA. They're both remote locations.
Okay.
And I'm curious your thoughts on this. So the first is the steam room etiquette. You and I both like the steam room. Mm-hmm. I was in D.C., and I was at the Equinox there. Equinox. I can't speak today. It's probably Tiger.
It's got you all flustered.
So their steam room's huge. It's massive. You walk in there and you can't see the corners of it. So it seems pretty crowded. I walk in, I sit down, and you hear deep breathing, grunting. I'm what is going on? A dude is doing yoga in the corner of the steam room. That's a little much, right? Even the steam room's big. He was fully stretching out. He was doing different things. He was in downward dog at one point. Bit much. So my first thing would be please, if you're gonna go to the steam room, just close your eyes and shut up.
I think unless it's your own steam room at home, you are not allowed to do push-ups, sit-ups, yoga, downward facing dog,
any of those things
in a public steam room. That's why they have hot yoga, right? Isn't that why That's they made point. Hot yoga?
Yes. This is funny because there was an article where someone interviewed Jack Dorsey, and it was like, what are, the 11 things that you do? You should go read it because it's absolutely comical. But one of the things he talks about are these like 2 saunas that he has at his home, and he goes from sauna to ice bath and back and forth. And basically the guy doesn't work.
Yeah.
He just does random weird things. But if you're Jack Dorsey and you have a sauna at home, do whatever the heck you want in your sauna at home. Just don't do it.
Just don't post it on Medium. Like, no one cares.
No one cares. Okay, now here's the other story I have, which I think we may be onto something here. So I'm in the gym at my apartment.
Okay.
And I'm warming up. I'm riding the bike. A couple comes in and starts jogging in front of me. And so I'm not really paying attention, but they turn the audio up on the TVs.
Okay.
So I can hear the TV. So all of a sudden I look up. The TVs are on these shows about like obese people, and like it's like chronicling their like desire to get some surgery or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like really graphic. Like you see these massive humans, like, God bless them, like whatever, like they clearly have diseases, right? I mean, they're huge, right? They're like 1,000-pound people. So what about a gym where you just set the TVs to always play replays of these shows as motivation? Like, I'm not thank God, in danger of becoming massively obese, but I was extra motivated whenever I happened to look up and see the screen. So I'm pushing a little bit harder every time I do something.
Okay. But given our line of work, what if we, in film rooms around the NFL, posted on loops teams running the ball in 2nd and long,
Wow.
and then the 3rd down condition they end up in?
You've
as
taken
a result,
this to the next level.
What if we
just apply this everywhere?
What if we like, how like those like, I remember this in like Boy Meets World back in the day where like Eric Matthews was listening to like a weight loss tape and he was like, you don't have to be afraid of food and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
What if we like in NFL rooms just had teams going for it on 4th down up on the screen and making it and being like, look, 4th down has no control over you. Like, it's okay.
I think it's great. The only thing I wasn't sure about was the couple that came in, God bless them, were a little...
It's like videos of fake punts.
They were a little chunky, and it didn't seem like they were exactly pushing that hard.
Well, what it might do is if you're a little chunky, what it might do is like lure you into a false sense of security.
Yeah, you're like, well, actually, I'm not that big, and if it really gets bad, I can just get surgery. So like, I'm not sure. The jury's still out.
We got to make sure that none of those videos in coach's office is like Mike Singletary operating.
Sure.
Like, well, at least I'm better than Mike Singletary coaching the Memphis Express.
Could go south real quick. That was my takeaway from the gym. Overall, I actually think having TVs in gyms is a disaster. Because people
don't like Stephen A. just like over the top of you while you're trying to do a hang clean?
If you have the ability to watch Stephen A. while working out, you're not really working out.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, that's probably fair.
It's my take. Like, I'm fine with, hey, I'm going to do, I'm going to hop on the bike and it's like, okay, it's a recovery session, whatever it is. Maybe I'm going to go hard. I'm going to do some sprints. So I like won't be able to pay attention at certain points type deal. But like if you're really trying to get in there and be efficient.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, like my favorite thing to do at the gym is to, run and watch an old football game on YouTube.
Right. You're welcome.
Yeah.
Get you out of that zone. All right. That's what we've got next week. We're going to have to find a time to do this remotely because we're actually going to be traveling. We thought we were going to be traveling this week. Traveling next week. So shoot us some questions on Twitter. Get ready for the draft. Enjoy the Masters. Tiger has a birdie putt. Let's go.